And now, my dear friends, a simple chant. Bismillah, Bismillah, Rahman, Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah. One more time. Bismillah, Bismillah, Rahman, Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah. So, my dear friends, if some words on the topic today, which is creating a safe space. And immediately I am thinking about what is my personal experience of being in a safe space from what I've heard, and particularly from my own personal involvement as I move from a knowledge of the tongue about this topic to a knowledge of the heart. Well, in my ministry, of course, I've heard a lot from people who've expressed their anguish, their pain, but particularly I would say, I've heard and learned a lot from women, Muslim and non-Muslim, who have expressed their wounds, their anguish, not feeling safe in a misogynistic, patriarchal, cultural society. I have heard and learned a lot about the LGBTQ community, of which I had very little knowledge. But what about my own personal experience? I come from a family that was very overprotective. I'm very close to my parents who have passed away now. But something I've talked about, the first time I actually felt unsafe when I was studying in London and I encountered this hate group called the skinheads. And there's one particular encounter where I thought I could have been badly injured or even killed. And that's the first time I felt from deep inside of me very unsafe because I couldn't hide the color of my skin. And for the first time, I had a very tiny, partial understanding of this Quranic verse that when there is chronic fear, anger, hopelessness, helplessness, and the verse is, it's not that the eyes become blind, the hearts become blind. So just be with that. So I ask you to ponder on also, as we're becoming quiet, what is your awareness of yourself feeling unsafe? And how has this impacted you? And this self-awareness done with mercy and compassion can be very healing, very empowering. So for me, I think in a heartfelt way, I became a little bit more spiritual because of this feeling of helplessness, feeling unsafe. I, I sought help from a source higher than human personality. Call it having trust in spirit, divinity, God. The Quran says, if God helps you, no one can overcome you. But if God forsakes you, no one can help you. So I began to focus more on the verses like, do some practices where you can feel the grasp of divinity's hand in yours in times of affliction. But I also remember that wonderful story by the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century when a Bedouin approached the prophet and said, I'm going to pray in the mosque. Should I tie my camel to the post, or should I just trust in God alone? And Prophet Muhammad famously said, first, tie your camel to the post, then trust in God. So for me, it became very important from the small experience in London. I sought community first of all, for the sake of uh, safety. And then I enjoyed so much being in community, and I learned so much about being in these circles that it really became for me a calling, my profession. And I began to study and research, and I realized that what really keeps minorities, the marginalized, safe, if they really form these communities, these circles, but also, most critically, interact with the other. So I began to study stories of, particularly in India, where there's conflict between Hindus and Muslims, but the Muslim minority in certain cities, when they formed circles of safety and they began to interact and intercollaborate with the others, in this case, Hindus, who are the majority religion in India, in areas of social justice, helping the marginalized, then it seemed to create a vibration that was very effective when communal riots broke out in other parts of India. But in those places where there were these circles of collaboration between the different circles, it seemed that they were significantly less affected. Okay, what else did I learn at this time? I studied the Quran more deeply, and I remember a couple of insights uh, about the story of the life of Prophet Muhammad. When the Prophet Muhammad, he felt abandoned by God, then after a long time, a revelation burst forth that said, did we not find you an orphan, give you shelter, and give you guidance? It goes on, and then it goes on to say, and therefore be not harsh with the orphans, do not repulse the petitioner, and the bounty of thy sustainer proclaim. Meaning that, particularly in times of affliction, never give up being of service to others. Do it according to your capacity. And also, as Rumi says, always, particularly in times of affliction, be in attendance at the divine court. The other story I remember in the Quran about the Prophet is when the community of Muslims was a very tiny, embryonic community, unsafe, surrounded by enemies, vastly outnumbered. And the Prophet Muhammad, he sought military treaties with the others. And he was engaged in this talk with this pompous tribal chieftain, and a blind old man, he interrupted the prophet and asked a question about the Quran. And the Quran says the prophet frowned, I guess maybe from the tone of the voice. He came across as being someone who frowned. And then that evening, a very powerful revelation came down to the prophet, saying that in this time of the prophet feeling unsafe and he undergoing this uh, critical work of forming military treaties with others, in this critical time, uh, the Quranic verse says, the one who came to you with an inner awe, him you disregarded. But the one who was pompous, the tribal chieftain, the one who was pompous, who considered himself self sufficient, to him you paid attention. The message from this is that even in times of difficulties, feeling unsafe, please never let go of your deepest values and principles. Okay, just be with that for a few moments. So I ask myself, what is most critical as I'm involved in this ministry of being in a community, expanding the community? But what is most critical for having a safe sanctuary? Of course, I would say the most critical point is, can I be inclusive? For me to be inclusive, it is critical that I do the inner work of overcoming my biases, my prejudices. And this is not an easy task. Again, in the Quran, there's a story of the Prophet Muhammad, who was, by all accounts, acknowledged by everyone, the most radical feminist, always supporting women's rights. But even the Prophet, he had some conditioning in that when the tribal men of 7th century Arabia, they taunted him that he had no male heir. His sons had died. He couldn't pass on his legacy because he had no son. The Prophet Muhammad lamented to God, "Oh God, I don't have a male heir to pass on my legacy." And immediately a verse burst forth, came down and said, the essence of which was, "To you we have given fully. We have given you the source of abundance," said the revelation. So in prayers and sacrifice, turn to God. That is what will give you fulfillment, satisfaction, completion in life, not those tribal customs. My point here is, even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had to overcome his cultural, conditioned bias about the critical need to have a male heir. The Buddha, 6 centuries before Christ, enlightened being, but when he talked about monks, he said only men can become monks. And there were some murmurings, how about women? They cannot become monks? He said no. It was only the intervention of his beloved stepmother who convinced the Buddha to include women as monks. Once again, my point here is, even the most enlightened of us have to overcome our biases, our prejudices, our conditioning. So I ask myself, I ask you, am I aware of my conditionings? Just be with that for a few moments. The great sages say that we have to be very careful if we want to create genuine community, when looking at ourselves, to become aware of our anger. There is righteous anger. But if I'm not aware of my righteous anger, I allow it to fester, it can turn into a need for revenge. I might end up saying and doing things I shall really regret. A Bedouin once approached the Prophet Muhammad and said, "Can you share with me some very critical or some beautiful spiritual teachings?" And the Prophet Muhammad said, "Do not be angry." And the man said, "Okay, tell me more. Anything more?" He said, again, the Prophet said, "Do not be angry." He asked a third time, "Give me some spiritual practices. I've heard what you've said." And the Prophet Muhammad said, "Do not be angry." So commentators are saying, of course, there is righteous anger. But if I do not soften it, if I'm not aware of it, if I allow it to linger and fester, I repeat, it can really harm my community, other communities, make my people unsafe, make the others unsafe. So anger is a beautiful, powerful energy. Rumi calls it a king over kings, but it can only serve, says Rumi, if you rein it in, if you bridle it. I'm reminded of a story. 1947, my parents have told me many stories of the partition of the subcontinent. When the British left, India was divided, and there were two countries, India and Pakistan, based on the theory that on the principle that wherever there are more Hindus in that area, that becomes India. Wherever there are more Muslims, that becomes Pakistan. Overnight, it became two separate countries. And guess what? The Hindus in Muslim countries felt, in Muslim areas where there's a majority, they felt unsafe. And then Muslims and Hindus in areas where the majority of Muslims felt unsafe, they began a mass migration, one of the largest mass migration in history. And in that mass migration, Hindus and Muslims going to safe sanctuaries where there was a majority of their religious co-religionists. In that mass migration, there was a displacement of over 15 million people. And 1 million people were massacred. So my point is about a story of a gentle person, a Hindu man who, because of the bias, because of the anger, because of the fear, all rolled into one, he ended up, shockingly, killing a small, innocent Muslim child. And he came to Gandhi and he felt so guilty. He was a good man. And he said, I have done this terrible act out of anger. I have killed a baby, a Muslim baby. What shall I do? Please help me. And Gandhi said, I can help you. I tell you what, you go to a Muslim orphanage and adopt a Muslim boy and raise him as your own child. You killed a Muslim boy, raise this Muslim boy as your own son. And he was so happy. This man said, thank you, thank you. That feels so right. I will do that. I'll do that right now. And he was about to leave. Gandhi said, I have not finished. And I want you to raise this Muslim child in your Hindu household as a Muslim. Remember that, he said. I want you to raise this Muslim orphan in your Hindu household as a Muslim. Just be with that story and about the need to really become aware compassionately, lovingly about our negative ego attributes, but especially in this case, anger. The sages say if you want to create a safe sanctuary for yourself and for others, please be very careful with your words, with your speech. Know that your words can really wound others, particularly gossip. It can ruin people's reputation. Words have vibrations. In my work, in my ministry, I've become very aware as I've counseled people of how the words of parents, I'm thinking of two particular instances which are standing up in my mind. The words and the tone of the voice of the father, particularly. I remember this one particular case where this young little child loved poetry, and father was a literary critic, and he would write poems. And he one day kept trying to show his father his poem. I guess the father was very busy. He said, not now, not now. And when the little boy pressed him, he finally took it and looked for it for a few seconds. And he said, that's lousy. That's a lousy poem. That's lousy. Those just two words in that tone of voice that pierced the child's heart, broke his heart, and he never wrote poetry again. Until later in life, I had the chance to uh, connect with him, counsel him, and he talked about the fact that he really yearned to go back to writing, and he had started writing, and he became a successful a fairly successful writer, but he always had this block. You're lousy. Anyway, we did some therapy. His father was alive. He talked to his father. His father had even no memory of having said those words. And in the work of healing, he was able to reconcile with his father, overcome this wound, heal this wound. And many years later, I was so shocked. I was looking at a Newsweek magazine and I saw his book getting a review. So he had become a very successful writer. Just one more case I remember, because it stands out in my mind, that this person came to see me because he was so impractical, not practical in life, very intelligent, but not practical. And it turned out that on three occasions, his father had told him, son, you're so impractical. You're so impractical. And no matter how hard he tried, this voice still rang in him and affected his psyche, his behavior, his thinking, his actions. So all this by way of saying, please, let us all be careful how we speak to others, and the tone of voice. It has an impact. Therefore, it is wonderful to offer words of praise and encouragement as long as they're sincere. It has the power to heal and empower others. Again, sit with that for a few seconds. Please do not prejudge people. That's something I have learned. And just one quick example, uh, I used to avoid some people who I felt were always needing, wanting to be in control, always wanting to be in control. I would avoid them till by some circumstances they came to me for counseling. And when I talked to them, my heart melted when I heard their story. They were victims of sexual abuse. And in their life, I'm talking about two people, only when they finally took charge, they took control, were they able to heal and empower themselves. It gave me a deep understanding not to prejudge. Why would they let go of being in control if this is how they not only survived, but became successful? And by the way, I want to tell you the one story which they told me never to forget, and I always tell people, is a story of the raft. When I told them that, they of their own volition wanted to build faith as a way to overcome the need to be in control. The story is, let me take the Buddhist story of a person, allegorically, metaphorically, has to go to a certain destination, crosses mountains, goes through deserts, but now comes to a body of water. He cannot cross that, but he casts his creative eyes around. He sees some bamboo poles, some jute, we call in our country, twinings, and he makes a small, tiny raft, putting the bamboo together. And he gets on the tiny raft and he crosses the river. But as he goes on the other side, he picks up that raft and puts it on his head or shoulders, and he continues on his journey. And that's the end of the story. But the caption is, and how burdensome his journey has become. He doesn't want to let go of that raft. What if up ahead, another body of water comes there, and this time there are no bamboo poles, no twinings? Ah, maybe he needs faith, or she needs faith. Just be with that story. So it's critical for me, if I want to have a safe sanctuary, if I want to go deep rather than be superficial, I really listen to the other. An adversary, we have said many, many times, is just someone whose story I have not listened to. Okay, just a couple more points. May I be just equitable. And may I take action when there is injustice. The story I love to repeat again and again is of the mullah who visits the king, a very pious, just uh, king, and who shows him the walls he has erected, large walls surrounding the city, and the armies he has put together, and the armaments. And the king tells the mullah that, these large walls and this powerful army protects me from my domestic and foreign invaders. And the mullah said, Your Majesty, you're wrong. What keeps you safe, what keeps you protected are not the walls, are not the armies. It is the justness of your decisions, the justness of your policies. That is what keeps you safe. So to feel safe, in my position, when there's injustice, in your position, when there's injustice, according to our capacity, we must do something. The Prophet Muhammad said, if you encounter injustice, use your hands, meaning take some action, get engaged, participate, do something. If you cannot do that, use your mouth, speak out, speak up about this injustice. If you cannot do that, then yes, of course, pray for the person from your heart. But he says, believe me, in this case, this is the weakest form of faith. And may we have higher awareness. I was watching a TED talk where this person was talking about our ideas about the poor. They make wrong decisions, they eat unhealthy food, they can be irrational, they can be lazy. And so American psychologists, they did a study of sugarcane farmers. It so happens that for a large part of the year, they have very low income. And then for a short part of the year, they have a good income. There's abundance. And they found that in that period where they felt unsafe, insecure, poor, their IQ level during that period dropped 15 points. May we have a deeper understanding of poverty. Another insight about poverty, Mother Teresa always says that, the poor that she has ministered to, the ones who are dying on the streets, yes, they would love to have more food, more medicine, but what they really are yearning for, and she said this is universally what she found out, the ones who are dying on the streets, what they're really yearning for is just some love, some care, and the heartfelt need to be touched. I have said enough, my dear friends, but I cannot go without saying, please note for me the quotation in the Quran that says, animals are communities like your own. The earth is like your mother, says the Prophet Muhammad. Honor her, protect her. If the earth cannot breathe, the truth is, we humans, we shall suffocate and perish. So may we all come out of the circle of time and enter the circle of love. Let's just be with that for a few moments. And now a short meditation. Just sit back, become relaxed, and then focus on your nostril and just be present with your breath as you inhale and as you exhale. Just this much. present with your breath. Awareness of the in breath and the out breath. And now let go of this. And this time, focus on the lowest part of your spine, the sacrum area, and make an intention to send a beautiful cord of light, divine light, pouring out from the sacrum area, going down, way down, deep into Mother Earth, connecting us to the womb of Mother Earth, feeling rooted, safe, feeling a sense of belonging. And now let go of this. Focus now on the crown of your head. And from the crown of your head, please intend to send a beautiful cord of divine light, any color, pouring out from the crown of the head, going upwards, way up, higher, higher, piercing those mysterious realms and connecting us to the heart of heaven. Feel that heavenly connection. And now letting go of that, focus on your heart and make an intention from your heart. You're sending out, pouring out light and love in an outward, expansive direction. Remember, the heart is a wellspring of love and light which is inexhaustible, eternal, infinite, unabashedly, fully pour out light and love pouring from the heart. Okay, one last step. Focus your attention deep into Mother Earth, into the womb of Mother Earth. And from the depths of Mother Earth, feel a beautiful cocoon of protection emerging from the womb of Mother Earth, going into your sacrum area, and in a cocoon covering you, enveloping you in a mantle of divine light and protection, all the way to the crown of your head. Feel yourself cocooned by this beautiful divine vibration from the womb of Mother Earth, flowing up into your sacrum area, all the way to the crown of your head. And now focus on those heavenly realms and feel a beautiful divine vibration filled with love, blessings, healing, descending. And as it comes into the crown of your head, it goes all the way down throughout your body, again covering you, cocooning you, enveloping you in this vibration, a mantle of divine protection. Just be with that, feeling safe, feeling blessed, feeling loved. As I chant Bismillah, coming into awareness, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Gently opening your eyes.